For centuries, the Roman Republic built its legend on unyielding legions, disciplined tactics, and an aura of victory. Yet, in 217 BC, on the shores of Lake Trasimene, a single morning's fog and one man's strategic genius would utterly obliterate not just an army, but the very confidence of the Republic. 15,000 legionaries, gone in a few hours, not from a pitched battle, but from an ambush so complete, so devastating, that many fought without even seeing their enemy. This was not merely a defeat. It was the complete annihilation of a consular army, a calamity almost unparalleled for a republic that had, just decades prior, emerged victorious from the First Punic War, convinced of its military supremacy. Carthaginian losses, by stark contrast, amounted to a mere 1,500. Welcome back to the History Atlas. Today, we dissect the Battle of Lake Trasimene, a masterclass in deception and destruction, and Rome's greatest military disaster before Cannae. The First Punic War concluded with Rome victorious, securing Sicily and largely believing Carthage's imperial ambitions quelled. Yet, in the shadows of that defeat, a young boy named Hannibal Barca, instilled with his father Hamilcar's fervent oath of eternal enmity, grew into a commander of unparalleled strategic vision. His aim was not mere revenge, but the complete humiliation of the Republic. In late 218 BC, Hannibal unleashed his audacious gambit, an overland invasion of Italy, defying all Roman expectation. His incredible march across the formidable Alps, though costly in men and beasts, was a testament to his strategic audacity and an early demonstration of his ability to weaponize terrain. Emerging onto the plains of Cisalpine Gaul, he swiftly delivered two stunning defeats to the Romans at the Ticinus River and then the Trebia, shattering any lingering Roman complacency and sending shockwaves through the Senate. While one consul, Gnaeus Servilius Geminus, urged caution, the political climate favored decisive action. Into this charged atmosphere stepped Gaius Flaminius, elected consul for 217 BC. A popular figure known for his reforms and ambition, Flaminius possessed a fierce desire for direct confrontation and a disregard for traditional omens, believing only immediate engagement could halt the Carthaginian advance. He commanded an army composed primarily of 2 legions, approximately 20,000 infantry and 2,000 cavalry, bolstered by allied contingents. While representing Rome's formidable discipline and heavy infantry prowess, these legions possessed the inherent rigidity of the manipular system when confronted with unconventional threats. Flaminius himself was characterized by an almost reckless impetuosity. He exuded confidence in direct confrontation, often dismissing Carthaginian tactics as mere trickery. This dangerous underestimation blinded him to Hannibal's true genius. Courageous in battle, he was strategically naive, strictly adhering to Roman combat doctrine. The Roman strategy was thus bifurcated: either block Hannibal's southward progression or engage him directly to spare Italy's heartland from devastation. Hannibal, ever relentless, continued his advance, bypassing Roman strongholds and deliberately ravaging the rich countryside, systematically drawing Flaminius deeper into a perilous pursuit. Opposing this force was Hannibal Barca's veteran army, a far more heterogeneous and numerically superior host, estimated between 40,000 and 50,000 men. This diverse host of warriors included elite Carthaginian heavy infantry, swift Numidian cavalry, resilient Iberian foot soldiers, fierce Gallic warriors, and deadly Balearic slingers. Accompanying Hannibal were brilliant subordinates like Mago and Maharbal, who commanded specific elements with skill, while logistical strain and a multitude of languages presented challenges. These were profoundly outweighed by the army's vast combat experience, tactical flexibility, and above all, its unwavering loyalty to Hannibal himself. Hannibal was a master manipulator of perception and terrain, possessing an unparalleled genius for deception and ambush, meticulously supported by excellent scouting. Unlike Flaminius's legions, which excelled on open battlefields, Hannibal's force, forged through relentless campaigning, was supremely practiced in utilizing varied terrains, be it mountains, plains, or swamps. To its distinct advantage, a crucial skill Flaminius and his army critically lacked. While Rome grappled with the mounting anxiety of Hannibal's presence on Italian soil, the Carthaginian general was not merely reacting. He was meticulously engineering his next devastating move. This strategic masterpiece was designed to exploit Roman hubris and the impetuous nature of Consul Flaminius. His initial foray into Etruria was itself a feat of brutal endurance. A grueling 4-day march through the virtually impassable Arno marshes. This ordeal, which cost him many men, horses, and even one of his eyes due to infection, was a deliberate gamble. It demonstrated his extreme commitment to bypassing Roman expectations and surprising them deep within their territory. Once through, Hannibal began a systematic devastation of the rich Etrurian countryside, torching farms and destroying villages. A calculated provocation to compel Flaminius, whose legions were stationed south at Arretium, into an immediate and decisive pursuit. Hannibal's choice for the decisive confrontation was Lake Trasimene, a location not stumbled upon by chance, but selected with surgical precision. Imagine a funnel with only one way in and none out. The northern shore of Lake Trasimene presented a narrow defile, a winding pass bordered on one side by the vast, impassable waters of the lake, and on the other by steep, densely forested hills that climbed sharply away from the shore. This natural choke point was perfect for a linear ambush, an extended killing ground where a large army, stretched in column, would be utterly vulnerable. With the stage set, Hannibal began his troop placements, orchestrating a devastating chain reaction. Along the northern hills, his light infantry and skirmishers, including Balearic slingers, were meticulously concealed amidst the trees, providing perfect cover and an elevated position for missile attacks. Further ahead, at the eastern mouth of the defile, where the pass opened slightly, his veteran heavy Iberian and Gallic infantry were positioned to form an impenetrable barrier, ready to halt the Roman vanguard. Critically, Hannibal placed his swift Numidian cavalry and additional light troops to the west, just inside the entrance to the defile. Their role was to sweep in behind the Roman rearguard, sealing the trap and ensuring no escape. Every unit had a purpose, every position a calculated advantage. The element of surprise, combined with the landscape's unforgiving geometry, was not merely a desirable outcome. It was the absolute core of Hannibal's plan, turning the very environment into a silent, formidable co-conspirator. The lake, limiting any possibility of flanking maneuvers, and the hills, offering perfect, unassailable concealment and launching points, ensured that Flaminius's pursuit would lead directly into an inescapable maw. On the morning of June 21, 217 BC, Gaius Flaminius, driven by his characteristic impatience and fierce desire to engage the Carthaginian invader, pushed his legions forward. Disregarding proper reconnaissance and dismissing any omens, he led his army directly into the narrow pass flanking Lake Trasimene, precisely the killing ground Hannibal had so meticulously prepared. As the sun rose, it did not burn off the exceptionally dense fog that had settled low over the lake and seeped into the surrounding hills. Instead, the cool, moist vapor thickened, creating an oppressive shroud that severely limited visibility to mere paces. For the Roman soldiers, the march became an experience of growing unease. The legions moved as a segmented serpent, stretched for miles along the constricted path, each cohort isolated within its own pocket of impenetrable mist. Muffled sounds echoed strangely, amplifying the ordinary creaks of equipment and the steady tramp of thousands of boots, yet obscuring any distant warning. This fog was not merely a natural phenomenon. It was a weapon in Hannibal's hands, specifically chosen by him as a co-conspirator. It rendered Roman scouting utterly useless, effectively blinding Flaminius's advance parties and denying the entire army any visual assessment of the terrain ahead or the concealed enemy positions. The column, denied proper observation, proceeded without forming battle lines or even maintaining compact marching order. Its vanguard pushed far ahead, emerging tentatively from the defile. Meanwhile, the main body and rearguard continued to file blindly into the trap. The lake itself, pressing against their left flank, offered no space for maneuver, forcing the entire army into a linear, vulnerable procession. With sightlines reduced to nothing and their forces strung out for combat not yet perceived, the legions marched on, utterly unprepared for the instantaneous, overwhelming assault that awaited them in the claustrophobic embrace of the fog and the land. The sudden, jarring blare of Carthaginian signal horns shattered the morning silence, echoing eerily through the thick fog that cloaked Lake Trasimene. This was Hannibal's signal, and it unleashed a catastrophe. From the hidden folds of the surrounding hills, Carthaginian light troops and slingers descended, raining projectiles upon the Roman column. Simultaneously, veteran Gallic and Iberian heavy infantry, positioned at the defile's head, surged forward to block any advance, while Numidian cavalry swept down from the rear, cutting off retreat and isolating the Roman vanguard. The effect was instantaneous and devastating. The Roman legions, strung out along the narrow pass and blinded by the dense mist, were plunged into an ambush from every direction. There was no time, no space, to deploy the manipular formations that were the bedrock of Roman military strength. Cohorts found themselves fragmented, their discipline dissolving under the shock of unseen attacks. Pressed against the steep, unforgiving hills on one flank and the chilling expanse of Lake Trasimene on the other, the legions were caught in a brutal, close-quarters struggle. The confined terrain, combined with the impenetrable fog, rendered communication and visual command impossible. Officers could not see their men, nor could men see their commanders beyond a few paces, leaving entire units leaderless and isolated. Amidst the sensory chaos of screams, the clang of steel, and desperate shouts of dying men, groups of Romans fought with the ferocity born of entrapment, but their efforts were localized and uncoordinated. They faced an enemy that struck from the veil of fog, seemingly from all sides, making organized resistance futile. Consul Gaius Flaminius, recognizing the horror unfolding, attempted to rally his overwhelmed legions, battling with conspicuous bravery in the thickest fighting. Yet, his courage could not compensate for the strategic blindness that led his army into this trap. Fighting amidst the desperate struggle, Flaminius ultimately fell, cut down by an Insubrian Gaul named Ducarius. With their commander slain and command structures shattered by the terrain and the fog, the Roman force was not merely defeated, it was annihilated, its coherence dissolving into individual struggles against an enemy they could barely perceive. Many, seeing no escape, chose the lake's cold embrace, only to be dragged down by their heavy armor. The catastrophe at Lake Trasimene was not merely a defeat. It was a masterclass in strategic deception and environmental exploitation. It exposed the profound tactical gulf between Hannibal Barca and the impetuous Gaius Flaminius. Hannibal's masterstroke lay in his meticulous understanding of both the physical landscape and the psychological makeup of his adversary. He waited, with calculated patience, for the precise atmospheric conditions, demonstrating a strategic foresight Flaminius utterly lacked. His plan was a coordinated symphony of destruction, a simultaneous strike from concealed positions at the front, flanks, and rear, turning a march into an instant, inescapable trap. Flaminius's fatal mistakes were numerous and interconnected. His failure to conduct proper reconnaissance in hostile territory, particularly when pursuing a known master of subterfuge, was a catastrophic oversight. To march an entire army, strung out in a lengthy column, into a narrow choke point without deployed formations or adequate flank security bespoke an almost willful strategic blindness, born of overconfidence and an underestimation of Carthaginian cunning. His impetuosity overrode any semblance of caution, aligning perfectly with Hannibal's predictions. The decisive turning point of the battle was the very moment the Carthaginian forces burst from their concealed positions. The initial shockwaves that rippled through the extended Roman column were immediate and overwhelming. The renowned Roman manipular system, designed for flexible deployment in open battle, was rendered utterly impotent. There was no space, no time, And critically, no visibility for cohorts to maneuver or form their deadly checkerboard arrays. Flaminius, despite his personal bravery in attempting to rally his men, found his command fractured and his legions fighting in isolated pockets, his death merely cementing the collapse. The terrain and weather at Lake Trasimene were not incidental backdrops. They were active, decisive characters in this unfolding tragedy. The narrow defile, a kill zone between the steep hills and the lake, became a suffocating trap, negating Roman numerical strength and disciplined formations. The lake prevented any flanking maneuvers or cohesive defensive lines, forcing many legions into the water to drown under the weight of their armor. The hills, which had offered unassailable concealment and elevated launching points for Hannibal's multi-ethnic forces, completed the trap, and the dense morning fog, rising spectrally from the lake's surface, became Hannibal's ultimate conspirator. This opaque shroud eliminated any Roman reconnaissance, preventing detection of the hidden enemy or assessment of the threat. It rendered Roman signaling and command ineffective, isolating units and leaving commanders without a clear picture. Crucially, the fog masked the Carthaginian ambush entirely, ensuring it remained unseen until the absolute last moment, magnifying the shock and disarray that shattered Roman morale and cohesion. Instantly, Hannibal's integrated force, with its Numidian light cavalry and multi-ethnic infantry, proved supremely flexible in this chaotic, sightless environment, contrasting sharply with the Roman legion's rigidity when deprived of their customary deployment space. The sheer scale of the Roman disaster at Lake Trasimene was immediate and appalling. Approximately 15,000 Roman soldiers perished, their bodies strewn across the narrow plain, along the hillsides, and choked in the shallow waters of the lake. Among the fallen was Consul Gaius Flaminius himself, cut down while bravely attempting to rally his disintegrating legions, alongside most of his senior officers. Another 10,000 men were either captured or scattered, many having drowned, their heavy armor dragging them down as they desperately sought escape. The very landscape became a vast, grim testament to Hannibal's ambush. Carthaginian losses, by stark contrast, were astonishingly light, estimated at only around 1,500 men, predominantly among the Gallic contingents who had borne the brunt of the Roman resistance. The day after the main battle, the Roman rearguard, some 6,000 strong, under Praetor Centenius, which had been too far behind to engage, was swiftly encircled and forced to surrender by Hannibal's relentless Numidian cavalry. Hannibal, ever the pragmatist and master of psychological warfare, immediately distinguished between his captives. Roman citizens were held for ransom or enslaved, but the Latin allies were released without terms, sent home with a deliberate message. Carthage had come not to conquer Italy, but to liberate them from Roman domination. This calculated generosity sowed seeds of dissent and undermined Rome's authority over its crucial allies. News of the catastrophe reached Rome as a profound shock. There was no public assembly, no speeches, just stunned silence. Then the cries of grieving citizens as the magnitude of the loss became clear. Fear gripped the Republic, prompting calls for drastic measures. The Senate responded by appointing Quintus Fabius Maximus as dictator, a man whose cautious and delaying strategy, the Fabian strategy, would fundamentally alter the course of the war, a direct consequence of the brutal lesson learned at Trasimene. The Battle of Lake Trasimene represented far more than a calamitous military defeat. It was a brutal lesson in the perils of underestimating a brilliant foe, the indispensable requirement for thorough reconnaissance, and the catastrophic consequences of impetuous leadership. For the Roman Republic, the psychological blow was profound, demanding a stark re-evaluation of its military approach and the character of its commanders. The aggressive, direct confrontation, epitomized by figures like Gaius Flaminius, rapidly yielded to the cautious, attritional strategy advocated by Quintus Fabius Maximus, famously dubbed cunctator, the delayer. This fundamental shift, even if initially unpopular, was a critical turning point that would eventually inform the strategic depth needed to confront and ultimately defeat Hannibal through figures like Scipio Africanus. Trasimene thus stands as a direct precursor to the later disaster at Cannae, both demonstrating Rome's vulnerability to Hannibal's strategic genius and simultaneously forging a resilience within the Republic that would endure a decade of Hannibal's presence on Italian soil. Its enduring legacy is cemented as one of history's most flawlessly executed ambushes, a definitive textbook example of how a commander can transform terrain and atmospheric conditions into decisive instruments of war. If you found this deep dive into Rome's darkest hour before its greatest insightful, be sure to like this video. Subscribe to the History Atlas for more historical explorations, and share in the comments. What other battles exemplify the power of environmental factors in warfare?